Hello and welcome to another episode of My Backstage Pass. This is your host, Lee Zimmerman, and I'm here with my producer, co-host, and good buddy, Billy Hubbard. And today we are really excited to have Danny McCloskey as our guest. Danny, I can't come up with a single introduction because you're a man of many talents, a multitasker in the true sense of the word. But I'm gonna let you tell the folks what exactly you do. You have a magazine, you have management. Go for it.
Currently, it does seem like a lot, but I've been doing it for many years, so it's really not that difficult. And I do find that I sort of go into automatic mode because many of the things that I deal with now, I've dealt with for decades. So currently, I am the manager of JTM Music, which is owned by Jeff Munger in Colorado. And we started that in 2019. And that is a full-on, I call it a service provider. I lean away from the whole label feeling because really most of what I do is talk to artists. We certainly have distribution. We have in-house management. We have in-house publicity, social media, touring, and radio.
Wow.
All of whom we have as consultants, basically. So that's the service provider, JTM
That's
Music.
one thing out of a
That's
lot of
one
things.
thing. So really, I really just manage everybody in that. There's not a lot of physical work for me. There's a lot of detail stuff, but I'm a Virgo, so that's pretty easy.
Okay.
And I'm organized. So I have that. And we also have the Alternate Route magazine, which has been up and running for well over a decade.
And I'm proud to say I contribute
of different
to that.
styles. You contribute
I
to
contribute, and I got to say, and I'm not just saying this because we're talking to you, Danny, but I take tremendous pride in contributing to the Alternate Route, which I consider one of the most credible publications out there these days, bar none. Okay.
I appreciate that. That was a good intro.
No, it's true. The Alternate Route. And for the listeners who have not checked it out, check it out, subscribe. It's a wonderful publication.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I really like it. It's when I started with two business partners well over a decade ago. I no longer have the business partners. One of them is still a very close friend, and I help him out. He has a television studio in Boston. But we always wanted to keep it small. So we put in maybe 6 reviews a week. Lee does the indie column every 2 weeks. So there's 5 completely independent artists, and we have 10 new videos a week. So it's manageable. And I think that's part of the appeal for people because it's not a long-term commitment. And you sort of can go in, you can go out. We have an e-blast that goes out to over 20,000, and we have I feel, a really high rate of reading, which is about 42%. Open it and click on it and everything like that. So wow. I'm very happy with the magazine.
Yes.
And we support a lot of different genres as well. Because I feel that there's, under the Roots heading, there's a lot of music. There's soul, there's funk, there's folk, there's Americana, blues, and all the hybrids. So we represent that. We tend not to, overproduction is definitely something that keeps people out. But other than that, I don't care if they're major artists or independent artists. It all fits in.
It's a wonderful publication, and one of the reasons is what you just said, Danny, because it does cover a wide spectrum of music, and we also, get to do some articles, interviews. I mean, which I love doing. So there's a lot of things there to lure people in, and I feel like I'm I'm bragging. I'm bragging on you, Danny, but I'm also bragging on me because I contribute. So what the heck, you know?
Well, you do. I mean, and they're wonderful interviews. In fact, just this morning, I was talking to my web guy, and we're going to have a dedicated page for interviews being
Excellent.
created as we speak.
Excellent.
So if anybody wants to go in there, they can find interviews. And also, we're going to have a new section for live streaming because, as I mentioned, my former business partner, Bill Hurley, has the Fallout Shelter in Boston, and he does a lot of live streaming. And I just set up 2 days ago, if you're familiar with the band, the Claudettes.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
The lead guy, Johnny, is a very good friend of mine for many years, and I saw they were touring Boston. So I called up Bill, and he had availability. So I hooked the two of them together, and the Claudettes will be doing a live stream in September through the
Excellent.
Fallout Shelter. Yep.
Excellent. Excellent. So there again, we've touched on two of the things you do, but there's a multitude of other things that you do. So
There's Desert Roots Music. I have a promotion company out here as well, which is pretty much just taking. I live in the high desert of California, wonderful spot
beautiful.
on top of a mountain. If anyone's familiar with Joshua Tree, I'm about 10 miles from there.
Amazing.
Lots of music, lots of venues. So I help book and I help connect artists to our friends and new friends, old friends, and try to help them get spots out here to play.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. And then you have a management, or not management, you corrected me on that. You have another company, a consulting company, I guess, with a management component to it.
It has. It's brand new. It's called Doolittle Distribution.
Okay.
And it's an artist services company. So it's really simply artist support. It's helping to put together their record, get the record out, get it to we if they're interested in radio promotion or publicity or any of the other features that artists use upon an album release, we can introduce them to people. And generally I would say 3 to 5 contestants who come in, and the artists and I interview them, and then the artists can make a decision.
So
luckily with the magazine, this all fits together because I work so much with publicists and radio people on the magazine end that I know a lot of them, and it's really easy, and I love doing it. So it's just to sort of build business for them or to connect people.
So you're kind of a conduit in a sense, right?
I'm a bridge.
A bridge. Okay. All right. Okay.
I'm a bridge between independence and industry.
Okay. And there's alliteration in that too. So that's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, I try. I'm also a writer.
Yeah.
I do a lot of writing, but that's not what I do for a living. It's just what I do for me.
Right. Right. You have a lot of things that you're involved in, Danny, and one has to wonder how you manage your time and go back and forth between these various interests and stay on top of it all. It sounds like a lot.
Well, you mentioned multitasking, and my partner has educated me that there's really no such thing. You can only do one thing at a time, and I agree with that.
Okay.
So what I do is I pretty much just do one thing until it's done, and then I pick up the next.
But aren't you tempted, like if something in another arena comes up, oh, I have to take care of that right now. I have to divert myself for a moment and do that, and then I'll come back to this, and I have to plan ahead for what I'm going to do this evening. I'm a little bit amazed. Dazzled might be the better word as to how all of that works.
Well, you're assuming there's a plan, which I'm
of course there's a plan. Of course there's a plan.
Well, there's a flow to it. Certainly earlier in the week, I dedicate mostly to the magazine.
Okay.
So Mondays and Tuesdays, because I need to get the copy to a web guy, I'm sort of pushed into getting everything together in the first few days of the week So that takes care of the magazine. The emails I read, I try to check in once an hour and maybe dedicate 10, 15 minutes every hour just to answering and looking at emails. I don't answer every email. I certainly put them into different folders
Oh,
so I know where to
okay.
find them.
Okay.
If I have new videos, if there's anything new, I immediately write it down. So answering email also is I research for what's coming up with the magazine. We have a weekly top 10, which I put out usually every Wednesday, but our web guy was in the hospital yesterday,
Oh,
so
no.
it went out this morning. So
Uh,
I'm just pretending today is Wednesday.
And today is actually when we're taping this Thursday. So you're a day behind, Danny. I hope that doesn't mess you up too much here.
I'm not a day behind at all. I've made today Wednesday.
Okay. All right.
I
You're
don't
on
think
your own
that's a day
time
behind
zone
at
here.
all.
Hey, I like your philosophy.
Yeah, and I'll finish everything now, and I'll be a day ahead tomorrow.
Okay. All right. It's still pretty dazzling.
So I take care of the magazine, and well, in the management or the label side of things, we do a lot of work with other labels. So there's a lot of partnership.
Distribution
So
wise, is that how it works?
with the releases,
But they
we
distribute
put
like
out our own artists occasionally. We have Matt Blake coming out, which is strictly a JTM music artist.
All right.
We have another release in June, I believe, for the Paul Benjamin Band, which is an artist out of Tulsa. And I've worked for many years with Horton Records out of Tulsa.
Yeah.
Tulsa is I probably shouldn't say this, but it's a untapped music scene with an immense amount of talent.
And history.
And there's a purity. Yeah, there's a history for sure. And there's a purity to the musicians in Tulsa. They're there, they do it for all the right reasons. Certainly they want to put records out, but it's not their main focus. Playing music and creating good music and playing with the other musicians in Tulsa is the focus. So as a result, we have bands. Paul Benjamin has been a band leader for just about everything in both Oklahoma and Texas. John Fulbright is the piano player in
Great.
kind of the house band. Jesse Aycock, who pedal steel, he does solo stuff.
Yep.
He was with Hardworking Americans.
Yep.
Is pedal steel and guitar. So, and there's others, there's local guys who are drummers, Patty and, Bo, the bass player, and Seth Lee Jones, another blues artist coming out of Tulsa, who we're working with. So we're very impassioned about that. And that also allows us, as you mentioned, it's just me. So I can work with another label who take a lot of the work on. Brian Horton is amazing. You think I'm busy.
and Brian, explain to us who is he involved with? What he has.
Brian is the owner of Horton Records.
Okay,
Brian
well that
Horton
makes sense.
owns Horton Records,
Mm-hmm.
And they put out a number of artists. I think he had 12 releases last year. We don't work with all of them.
Okay.
We work with a select group. So Paul Benjamin, Seth Lee Jones, Carter Sampson, we recently put out with Horton Records.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also have on the West Coast 40 Below Records with Eric Korn.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Eric Korn's a producer, and he partnered with John Mayall to start 40 Below Records. And they put out all John Mayall stuff.
Yeah.
And also all the archive stuff. So going back to the Blues Breakers with Mick Fleetwood and John McVie when they were in his band.
Right.
So, and Eric, with the production, he has a deal for artists where he produces them, and then they also go out on 40 Below.
Okay.
So we recently worked with Sarah Petit, with Eric, and we have another couple coming in down the line, and we just keep moving forward. So that helps me a lot with the workload.
Well, you were saying before we went on, started taping here, you were saying that you get 300 to 400 emails a day? A day?
Yeah, yeah.
Danny, my head would
Not every
explode.
day. I would
All
say
right.
midweek is about
Okay.
400.
That's
Tuesday, Wednesday,
amazing.
Thursday, about 300 or 400. Monday's a lot. Fridays, people don't care about it. It sort of trickles in.
I'm feeling a bit guilty now. Every time I email you, my dear editor, I'm going to feel guilty about it because I'm adding to that workload. But I
When this
hope when you
podcast
see
has been
my
a
name,
success
Danny,
already.
I know, but I hope when you see my name, you'll say, hey, that's a priority.
I always do.
Thank you.
But and you bring up a good point because many of those emails are responses. So any email that I respond to, I think of it as like bait. I'm
Yeah.
tossing out raw meat to people so that they can answer and engage.
Well,
So
sometimes
I
it's
do. That's why I
necessary.
don't
Yeah.
answer every email, but I do read every subject line.
Okay. Okay. Now, that is your present, and it's mind boggling. But you have a rich history in the music business. Tell us a little bit about that, Danny, because it goes back a few years.
It
Um,
goes back a long time. It goes
yeah.
back to I would say I was 14, and I was lucky enough to grow up very close to an amusement park, Willow Grove Park in Pennsylvania. And it was probably a mile away, maybe 2 miles away from where I grew up. I thought every kid had an amusement park in their town. So I would go there a lot, and I would always go with my friends. And at the time, there was just AM radio, and the local AMs this was outside of Philadelphia, would have concerts on a weekend. I don't know how much of a concert it was. I don't even know if the bands were playing live, but I was 14.
Okay.
Didn't matter.
All right.
And on top of a very wide cotton candy stand, I saw the Easy Beats playing Friday
Ah,
on My Mind. And these guys you
wow.
could tell they were, even at 14, I could tell they were toasted and they had like these wild outfits and long hair. And I looked at it and I remember as a 14-year-old thinking, I can do that.
Wow. Okay.
And that's what started it. And it progressed. I remember my first festival was, it turns out it was 2 weeks before Woodstock, but I would have thought it was months before Woodstock, was the Atlantic City Pop Festival
Mm-hmm.
with many unknown acts. In fact, Santana was so unknown that Bill Graham had to pay to have them put on the bill.
At
But it
Woodstock
was,
or at
no, this
at
was
this
Atlantic
festival.
City, which
Okay.
was 2 weeks
Okay.
before Woodstock.
Okay.
Wow.
Um, and yeah, we were kids. Nobody knew about festivals. So it was a bunch of kids it was a racetrack outside of Atlantic City, and they had all this music. And on the third day, I was a big fan of Paul Butterfield Blues Band, even at 14 and 15, because I was playing in bands. I played organ, and I was lucky enough to have all these 21, 22, 23-year-olds who were in the band turn me on to music.
Huh.
So anything we would play in the band, they were interested more not in pop, but in the newer music coming out. So I was educated to Blues Project, Paul Butterfield Blues Band, and many bands that have become a core for me that I would have never heard about if I wasn't playing with these musicians who were older and a little bit more adept at what was going on with music.
Okay.
So I knew about Paul Butterfield, and they were playing. And I thought, well, let me see how close I can get to the stage. It turned out I could walk right through everything. And if you look like you know what you're doing, people just let you through. So
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and this was before Woodstock, so there was no backstage passes. There was nothing. There was
Yeah.
like, oh, I play with that band. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I wound up being on the side of the stage when Paul Butterfield and his band walked up on stage, and they were totally. Can I say fuck?
Well, Billy, that's
Uh,
up to you, Billy. Billy,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, we leave adult words in
They
there.
were
we
totally
use an
fucked up. I
adult
mean, they
world.
were
Yeah.
Okay.
toasted.
All right.
And they got up on stage and they played and they were awesome. They were absolutely incredible. So I also learned that, you could easily get back into this stuff. And then Woodstock was 2 weeks later. Coincidentally, with the moon landing and the Manson murders, in
Yeah.
between those 2 weeks, a lot happened in 1969.
Yeah, I know.
It's just
Brian
when
Jones
you
of the
look
Rolling
back,
Stones
it's
died. Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
But so then I did go to Woodstock as well, and I felt seasoned by the time I got to Woodstock because I had already been to a festival, and obviously nobody else had.
Yeah.
And Woodstock was amazing because I was from a small town outside of Philadelphia, and we hung out in a Hot Shops parking lot. All these, brand new hippies growing their long hair and everything, and listening to the new music. So for Woodstock, we obviously wanted to go, but we thought it was happening the same scene in New York, San Francisco, LA, Chicago, wherever else, big cities, but not in our small town. Woodstock sort of educated us to it was happening in every small town.
Hmm.
And there were little bands of hippies in every small town. So as a result of meeting all these people, I never saw one band at Woodstock until the movie came out.
Yeah, I know. My wife was at Woodstock, and I keep saying, "What was it like?" Well, I want insight, and she can't remember a thing. She remembers
Oh, I can remember
Cantite. She
things, but
remembers
I didn't see
Cantite.
any bands though.
All right. It's more the
I was just
experience.
wandering around. I mean,
Okay.
it was mind-boggling to know that there were that many people interested in the same lifestyle, the same beliefs, the same music. We just didn't know. We had no idea in a small town. So once we were in that environment, we just met other people and talked and got to know and listened and shared beliefs.
Did you spot yourself in the movie?
I did not.
I'm
I
so.
did get stuck in mud, and I was pulled out by Max Yasgur, which I thought was good, who probably made a fortune with his tractor that weekend.
Ah, yeah. Okay. Okay.
They're all, it's a free festival, not for Max.
How
He had
old
a
were
tractor,
you?
and there was lots of mud.
How old were you? 14, 15, you said?
I was 16.
16. Okay. It's a heady experience for a young person to be.
It was,
It could.
but I had been playing in bands for 2 years by then.
Okay.
Um, and I got into music at about 11. I lived outside of Philadelphia. I knew where the train station was, and I would take the train station into town by myself. And I was terrified being in a big city. So I would only walk about 3 blocks in whatever direction those 3 blocks were to Sam Goody's.
Okay.
And Sam Goody's was 3 blocks from the train station. I would walk in there, and when I first went in, I would just buy the quickest music, which now it turns out is where the staff picks, and they were up front. So I bought the first Cream record simply because of the cover.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there was, at that point in time, there was really no FM stations. They came in probably like 67, 68. And
Yes.
I had WMMR in Philadelphia, which was a godsend for me. And so I got into music.
And
And I
they.
went about my life, and I grew up, and I was always into music. I was always around people who were into music, but didn't really work in it. I was a waiter, a bartender, and by the late 70s, I was traveling. I had moved to a little town outside of Philadelphia on the Delaware River called New Hope.
Okay.
And I lived there, and I was vacationing in Provincetown. Met someone in Provincetown, and we became partners. And Nicholas and I went to and he was in the antique business for 10 years.
Okay.
So we decided a great way to travel would be to travel and do antique markets, and we would set up. I would sell, he would buy, and we landed in Key West, where, curiously enough, there was only an AM station, but the AM station had a DJ. This was like 78, who was really into all the new music coming out. So we got to
Okay.
hear Joe Jackson, we got to hear the
Yeah.
B-52s, and it was a whole new world, and I absolutely loved it. Because bands had gotten a little bit too big for me. Everything was big stages, and big sound and everything. So new wave and punk were just made for me. And we got into it in Key West, and we went to Boston to visit a friend of Nicholas's, an old friend of his, because it was a hurricane.
Yes,
So we
yes,
in
that's
Key
one
West,
reason to
and
leave. Yeah.
we loved Boston, and we went back to Key West, packed it in, took everything up to Boston, and we're living with Eddie, and I was working, and we were doing the flea markets on Cape Cod and in Boston and many other spots. There was huge flea markets in the late 70s, early 80s, like huge, acres long. So we would do those, and the guy we were staying with, Eddie, met a man named Jimmy Mack, who was
And the heart
at
attacks.
that time, the music director for WBCN in Boston. And I
Okay.
didn't really know radio. I knew MMR. I had listened to BCN, really liked it, but I really had no thoughts about radio or getting into it. So Jimmy and I stayed up one night and we just talked about music. And at the end of it, he said, "You should really work at the station." And he hired me as an intern. And
Wow.
that's what happened.
Wow. Well, I said, when you mentioned Jimmy Mack, I said automatically, Jimmy Mack and the heart attack. Was that? No? Different?
Mm-mm.
Not? Okay.
No,
Never
Jimmy
mind.
McIntyre.
All right.
And at the time, he was 18.
All
So he
right.
was an 18-year-old music director
Wow.
for WBCN in Boston. And the staff had gone over. Our program director was Oedipus.
Yeah, I remember
Tony
that name.
Berardini, music director.
I remember that name. Yeah.
And it was a consortium of I would say about 40 or 50 people who were incredibly talented. And I was not the talented one, but I knew a lot about music, from all my life, because that's all I cared about. And there were no computers.
Right.
So I became kind of the computer for music. And I was an associate music director, first with Mark Miller, who was the music director, and then with Bob Cranes. And I just learned about music, and I became an engineer, and I would work the board for shows. Sundays, I pretty much was entirely on the board because we would do a lot of special programming. We would start at 6 to 12 in the morning with Matt Schaefer, Boston Sunday Review. And I got to not only run the board, but he would, because we were a huge station, we would get everybody of note who was putting out books.
Oh,
So I met
BCN was
Timothy
huge.
Leary. Yeah,
Yeah.
Timothy Leary would come in, and Abby Hoffman, and we did. So I ran the board for that. And then in the late 80s, I started to work with Atlantic Records. I made the transition from
Yeah.
radio.
A lot of people
Actually,
did.
not the late 80s, the early 80s. I made the transition about 85
Mm-hmm.
into maybe 84, but started to work with Atlantic Records, and I was the Northeast promotion manager. And I would have never gotten that job if it wasn't for BCN. It
Well,
was more important, I'm sure,
yeah.
to Atlantic Records, and they liked what I did, and I can be charismatic, so I think that was appealing to them.
Yeah. I
And I
mean,
was very willing to be on the road all the time, so that was also appealing.
well, that was a normal transition. I was a promotion guy for Capitol Records, and I know a lot of the people that were hired to do promotion came from radio because A, they had the insight, B, they knew people, and C, they had the credibility. When you go to promote a record and you were in radio and you're going to a radio guy, there's a certain amount of credibility there. So that made a lot of sense. And
Yeah.
Atlantic Records, I mean, I could name drop a few people that I knew at Atlantic Records at the time, but what a great label to be associated with. That must have been a really wonderful experience to be doing promotion.
It
with
really
them.
was.
Yeah.
And I agree about the transition from radio to labels.
Sure.
And honestly, BCN was such a huge station. It was probably more important for Atlantic to know that they could get an ad for a new record at BCN than anything else. So it was a win-win
Yeah.
for everybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I had New England as my market,
Great.
and it was on the road. And also at the time, Atlantic was distributing Virgin and Island records.
Right. Yeah. That's
So
great.
I was always on the road. And I
Yeah.
would visit radio in Maine and New Hampshire, and I would make myself available for shows in upstate New York, in Rhode Island, in Massachusetts, Vermont, and New Hampshire.
Okay. All right.
So
So,
that was a great training in how to be busy and how to handle it,
yeah. So,
as you were saying before.
yeah. So, how long were you involved with the label in the label part of the industry before you
Up
went
until
off and
1990, I was with Atlantic, and it was either 89 or 90. And I was, by that point, burned out because it had been 10 full years of an education and a working education in music. And it was, you can imagine what BC, and it was the 80s.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah,
music was so important to everyone in the 80s.
yes,
It was more important than movies. It
yep,
was the prime mover for culture.
yes, yes. What?
And I was right in the middle of it. And
So
I didn't even know it at the time. So, you know, you can imagine the enticements that would come from trying to get somebody to play their record. And
sure.
being in the music department, it was myself and the music director's role to go out when any labels came into town, when any artists came in town for dinner.
I
We were the
remember it
ones that
well.
had to be available for it.
I remember it
You
well.
know,
I did that as
boo
well.
hoo.
So, but you bring up an interesting point, Danny, because you say back then the music was such an inherent part of the culture, and it really shaped the culture in many ways. How do you compare then with the way it is now? The change in climate,
Well,
so
I
to
don't
speak.
think there is a comparison really. It's two different industries. Um, I would think that none of the touchstones that I would have used in the 80s or anybody in the industry would have used in the 80s. I mean, we were called the hitmen
Yeah,
because
yeah, the
it was our
Hitmen. Yeah,
responsibility
yeah,
to get records played
yeah,
because and not only I think even the public was aware of the Billboard charts in the 80s, and I wouldn't think that that's, you know, I'm not even aware of the Billboard charts now.
yeah. That's
You know,
true.
it was such a and there were trade papers.
Radio and
You
Records,
know, you had
Gavin,
R&R, you had the Album Network, and
Rudman. Yeah,
and Billboard,
yeah,
and it was everyone was so invested in hit records and making hit records and supporting the industry that it, and I don't feel that it's that way anymore. You can't, one cannot bring a record out and just assume that it's going to be a hit. Perhaps if you're a Taylor Swift, but even Taylor Swift had to promote her own record when she was receiving a Grammy.
hmm. Yeah,
And when
yeah,
when she took the Grammy, said, by the way, I have a new record coming out in April.
yeah. Right.
You
Yeah.
wouldn't have had to do that.
Y-
Of course, many of the artists receiving the Grammys wouldn't have known what they were saying anyway.
Right.
But now I don't think people are ready for even in the magazine, Lee. I mean, um, we put out stuff the week after release generally,
Yes.
and I do like to wait for that.
Yes.
But
As you've
does
told me
anybody
on several
care?
occasions, Danny McCloskey.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
that's okay, but I have storage, and it's good to
Yes.
have them.
Good. Yes.
Um,
Thank you.
And, we put out stuff as is, but I get a lot of pitch notes from publicists about previews for the magazine. And we never do any previews because I don't think anybody cares. We have our readers. We're not interested in what the industry thinks of us. We write and we deliver for the end user. We get the stuff out for people to read and enjoy, and ideally like. And I get a ton of notes because I still get a lot of physical email, physical packages.
Thank goodness.
And the notes I get from people are sometimes it's on ripped out paper from loose leaf
I
binder.
get those too.
Um, yeah,
Yeah,
post-its,
it's funny.
little things. So
It's
it's
funny.
interesting. It's very heartwarming,
Yeah, yeah, it
and
is. It's a
and it
personal
separates
touch.
them, and so that's good. But I don't really do previews or anything. When it's out, we put it out. And then with the label, as I mentioned, we have a new artist coming out in this month, March, Matt Blake. And you'll be receiving your CD soon, Lee. I just sent them out the other day.
Excellent.
Uh, and, things are moving. But as you can tell by this recollection of where I've been, what I've been doing, at this point, it's a lot easier because I have been doing it for a number of years.
Yes.
And there's like this constant puzzle pieces in my mind that see where things fit a year or two from now.
Okay.
With the magazine, there were a lot of surprises we didn't anticipate. We never thought that the people we would champion would soon be on the same level as the people that were artists of note. So there are many artists who we were writing about early on. I would get like cassette tapes, handmade cassette tapes from Hooray for the Riff Raff and
Oh my
Sarah Shuck
gosh.
and the Disarmers, because they were
Yeah.
just buskers then.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the same with Old Crow. They started as tapes on the corner, Old
It-
Crow Medicine Show. And so to see many of these artists move up, we were very embroiled with the Americana Music Association
right.
and we have been for many, many years.
Mm-hmm.
And because of their inclusion of music, we could spread out so that we didn't have to be just one style.
Right.
And that's very appealing to me too, because it gives you a bigger well to choose from and to present. And even in the top 10 or the reviews, I try not to do any one thing. I try not to make it all men, all women,
Right.
all diversity, all rock,
Right.
all country, all Americana. And sometimes the balance is off, but that's just a particular week. And I feel you can't really force it, but we really try to. There's a lot of talk about diversity now. We started on that because that was the way I wanted to run it. And for magazines, if I was to give any indicator of where I put what I wanted to do, it would be Mojo and NME, which
Oh, the
were
best. Yeah.
magazines out of the
I
UK.
love Mojo.
And I would go up to Barnes and Noble every month and buy
Yep.
them because if they mailed them, generally the CD that they put in the magazine would fall out or would be ripped out. So I'd
I
go
have
to
a
buy
mailed
them so that they
subscription.
gummied them to the
No, I have a mailed
to the
subscription, and so far so good.
yeah.
You know.
Well, they were putting them in plastic then.
Yeah,
And
it didn't
and
have their
again,
thin
people were
cases.
more
Yeah,
into
cardboard.
music. They'd be like, "Oh, there's a CD. Let me take it."
Yeah, yeah, that's true too. That's true.
So anyway, I would go up and I loved how they just talked about music. It wasn't one focus of music and there wasn't age to
Yeah,
it. You could be 80 or you could be 18
yeah,
and you could still get in the magazine. So that was a model for us when we first started the magazine.
and it works.
And yeah, and it works. And as I said, Bill Hurley was the Atlantic representative Atlantic Records rep, who went into the Boston market when I left.
Okay.
So I knew Bill for many years. And when I got to LA, not really doing a magazine, but I was still still working in music. And I worked for Taxi and I did a bunch of other organizations. And I was doing film and TV placement at the time. And that was my main bread and butter and artist management. And I was managing bands out of San Francisco, Blue Period and Sparrows Point and Ing. And I got to LA, I started to pitch them for film and TV, and I liked it a lot better than working with the band. So I managed music. I brought in a lot of clients, and that took me to Taxi, and I would still do that. And at one point, I brought in one artist in Taxi, and Bill Hurley, who was representing the artist for promotion. So the guy told Bill about me, and Bill called me the next day, and we talked for hours. And he called me the following day, and he said, "Hey, let's put the band back together." So we started a magazine, and we didn't know anything about a magazine at all. And luckily at the time, there was a online site which has since been purchased by Amazon called Alexa.com.
Not
And
Alexa that we ask Alexa.
Nope, there was no Alexa that we know
Okay, it was
yet.
a different Alexa. Okay.
Yeah, but they have since. That's why they bought it. That's why.
Okay.
Because they wanted the name. So Amazon
Okay.
bought it as soon as Alexa came in. But Alexa.com was a free service where you could see what your website was doing in real time. And you could see, and by real time, probably a few hours for the algorithms to catch up. But if we posted an article, we could immediately see how well it was doing. And over the course of the week, we could see how well it was doing. And I was posting stuff every day. So we would post, and we would get in, and we would see what was going on. And that's how we built it up. And that's how we found out what people liked. And we would just watch the online trends. And we did a ton of giveaways and, voting stuff to get people in. And we acquired a readership.
How large is the readership now, if that's the proper terminology?
Yeah, I would say we have about 100,000 unique visitors a month.
Wow, that's amazing.
And we have a 20,000 plus email blast list, and that goes out every Saturday. And with that, I would say as I mentioned before, we have a 42% opening, which is pretty high. But I think a lot of people see it and just sort of look at it as an email just to see what's new.
I love how you. I was going to say, I love how the bio. I was reading how I guess you was talking about you started out to level the playing field and let the albums, be heard on their own merit. That pretty cool mission you had.
And that's the way I still feel. And some, I used to have taglines, but like changing the world one song at a time.
I love it.
And I had another one which I think is still on there. And it was leveling the playing field. And because, certainly the Rolling Stones of the world cover all of the major artists. And they throw independent artists in, but they're generally clumped. So I felt that if we put it all together, that's the way to get it through. And again, back to the WBCN history, that's how Oedipus would program. He would have lettering and not dictate to the DJs, but he would have a group of records that any DJ could play in a certain time set, so that we could, if something was brand new, he would make sure it was at the end of their set so that they could back sell it and let everybody know who they were. So that's how I learned to level the playing field. Oedipus was amazing.
How did he get that name, Oedipus?
What a boss.
Was his last name Rex? Wasn't there an Oedipus?
No,
how did he get that name?
That's his name.
No, come on. That's a moniker of some sort.
I don't know.
Oh, Danny, you're just not revealing. Okay. All right.
But there were many other people at BCN. I mentioned the talent. And I go back to BCN all the time. I would say that was the best decision I ever made. I'll be at parties and just mention BCN, and the entire flow of the party will change.
Of course.
Because somebody will just go scream, "Oh my God!"
Of course, legendary.
In a Boston accent. I interview artists. Yeah. I interviewed Rod Picott years ago, and he grew up in Maine. He's like, and suddenly it wasn't an interview anymore. It was about his teenage years driving into where they could pick up the signal,
Sure,
parking for a couple hours and listening and going back home.
Oh.
But, among the other people there, Billy West did our voices in the production room, and he went on to do all of the voices for Futurama.
Mm-hmm.
And he still works today. I mean, you always see his voice in animation, and he's just about every cat that has a voice on commercials. And Eddie Gordetsky was in the production office as well, and he went on to executive produce 2.5 Men and Big Bang Theory, and Mom was his show. So, I mean, we all went out into different areas, and all of the DJs are pretty much still DJing in Boston and whatnot. Some of them went to XM, Sirius. But, everybody's still working. It was an amazingly talented group of people.
Well, Danny, I would have to include you in that amazing group in general, because what I get from this is your enthusiasm, your knowledge, your advocacy for music. That informs everything you do, everything you've done. And so it's a singular accomplishment, I think, to be able to have that to your credit. So congratulations on that, buddy.
Thank you.
And
I generally don't like compliments, but I like that one.
Oh, you can take a few. First of all, Danny, I work for you. I have to butter you up. But I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
But are you?
No, I mean it sincerely. I try to make.
No, I love chatting with you, Lee. I love working with you.
Oh, thank you, sir.
You're as a writer, I can assure you, you are in a class all your own. Not only because of the way you write, but the amount that you write. I've taken in over the course of the years.
I'm exhausted.
Writers would be like, well, I can get you a couple. I can say one. I'll get you 2 a month. And there was no irony with them at that. And at that point, I was writing the whole magazine myself. We even put out 6 physical issues, 4 of which I wrote all myself, physical magazines. And to hear these people say, I'll get you 1 or 2 a month, that's nice. How nice for you.
No, I am truly, truly dedicated to the task at hand because I'm honored, and it's just wonderful to be a part of it. And
you like music.
I like music. It's a wonderful outlet, and it's prestigious, for lack of a better word, to be associated with this particular publication and with you, sir. I mean, and I'm not saying that just to be frivolous. I really mean it. And
thank you.
Wow. You're an amazing guy, and thank you for all you do, and thank you for this crusade for new music. It means a lot. It really does.
Amen.
It's a charge.
Well, it's been a pleasure.
And Billy, don't you have a new record out?
Yeah. Actually, I was when my record came out. It's kind of weird. Okay, I was going to go all independent. I produced the record myself with a couple of Grammy-winning artist friends in Nashville. Well, actually more than that. And so anyway, after it came out, I mentioned the Spectrum Music. They approached me, and I didn't want to give up my publishing, so they said, "Well, if you'll split the royalties, we'll do the radio promotion and the playlist promotion and all that." So I hope it was the right decision, but so it came out.
It's a wonderful record.
Came out in October, and
got to send it to him.
You've got so much knowledge.
Is it under your name?
Yeah,
Billy Hubbard. It's just Billy Hubbard, but I had to. My mom was in the music business.
What's the name of the album?
Billy Hubbard.
Billy Hubbard. Now that's hard to remember. I can't get that straight. It's Billy Hubbard. What's the name of the? I don't know. I can't. It's very difficult to remember.
Yeah, but so I had But I was reading your bio though, and we may we may have to have you on again. There's a lot of good questions. A lot of our listeners are singer songwriters, and So a lot of like I saw you were at one point in your life a music supervisor, which is interesting. I had one record. The second song on the record is called Civil War Letters. So I was reading all these Civil War letters, and they were so beautiful the way they would write back then, even though they're young. A lot of times they're young kids, and so anyway, I put together a song based on these real letters, and which would be great for a Civil War letter. A Civil War movie that comes out, but I'm hoping that this label is supposed to be promoting and reaching out to that. But anyway, a lot of good info you got for I'm sure for artists that maybe someday we can.
Yeah, not only films but documentaries. There's probably 1 million documentaries about the Civil War.
Oh yeah, and this one is it just turned out beautiful. I had Charlie McCoy, he's a friend of mine. He's still alive and 80. I think he's 81 years old now, and he's coming out actually again here pretty soon I have a music venue here in East Tennessee called The Station.
Yeah, wonderful.
And it's just a labor of love. So if you're ever in Tennessee, come see us.
Well, we're trying to get Danny to East Tennessee.
Oh, yeah.
And Danny says that's a real possibility, or at least in my imagination.
It's even more of a possibility today than it was when we talked about that a couple of weeks ago, Lee.
Really?
Yeah, because it turns out this Claudette show that I booked for Boston is in September. So now Johnny is like really dogging me to come to the show. You set it up. So what my partner Jeremy and I will probably do.
We're not in Boston, Danny. We're not in Boston.
I know, but you're not far away. I mean,
no, we're not. It's a couple.
And we love to drive. Whenever Jeremy and I go on any conferences, we never get vacations. So we hop in the car and we take Route 66, and we just got a new Jeep.
Okay, well, all right. I'm going to hold you to it. We had talked a little bit about Bristol Rhythm and Roots, so
yeah. So that's still on the table.
Okay, good. We'll make that happen.
Yeah, hey, we'll come.
As is Americana Fest, because
as
we
is
just got the house
Americana Fest,
yesterday.
of course. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, again, cool. Danny, thank you so much. Billy's going to take
welcome.
us out of here, and don't hang up. Stick around for a minute.
We're going.
I'm not going anywhere.
Okay.
Here. So
bye. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. Big thanks to our special guest Danny McCloskey and our host Lee Zimmerman. Check out Lee's new book, 30 Years Behind the Glass, Jim Gaines. It's available on Amazon. Also, please like, share, and subscribe to My Backstage Pass on your favorite platform. I'll take us out of here with a song off my music solo off my record. We'll see y'all next time. Happy trails.
Bye-bye.